Sure. It is a joy and a privilege to be with all of you. It goes without saying that the res novae, or the new things of Pope Leo XIII's Rerum Novarum, are not exactly those of the digital age. Our new and rapidly evolving context invites an aggiornamento, as it were, of the Church's social teaching, preserving its timeless principles while allowing for innovative thinking that speaks to its continued relevance, now well over a century since its promulgation, as the spirit of revolutionary change continues to move. What the Holy Father said at the opening of the text in 1891 sounds very much like a fitting description of our current era. May I have the clicker and I'll move the slide through. The momentous gravity of the state of things fills every mind with painful apprehension. Wise men are discussing it. Practical men are proposing schemes. Popular meetings, legislatures, and rulers of nations are all busied with it. Actually, there is no question which has taken deeper hold on the public mind. We can certainly say the same of the ubiquity of artificial intelligence in this century and of the sense of urgency stirred up by its vast and ever-expanding reach. Technological innovation moves with such speed that we find ourselves out of breath trying to keep up. Theological and ethical conversations are always lagging behind the insatiable pursuit of progress. And yet we, ethicists and theologians and people of faith, have much to say about it all. In his encyclical letter, Caritas in Veritate, Pope Benedict XVI wrote that technology is never merely technology. It reveals the human being and humankind's aspirations toward development. It expresses the inner tension that impels humans gradually to overcome material limitations. This said, it must also serve to reinforce the covenant between human beings and the environment, a covenant that should mirror God's creative love. I'll come back to this. For the Church, technology cannot, it must not be self-serving. Instead, it must have the good of human beings and the whole of the human family as its primary raison d'être. It is important to remind ourselves, as both Pope Francis of blessed memory and our Holy Father have insisted upon, that technology is a tool, sometimes a wonderful tool, that is meant to assist, to serve, and to help humankind and the world in which we live. However, there is a risk of technology becoming more important than the persons who use it, thereby becoming transformed into an adversary of human dignity rather than an instrument made to safeguard or promote said dignity. As such, technology must be an expression of stewardship and service. It must contribute to genuine progress. That is, a progress that will lead human beings to exercise a wider solidarity, which I admit is a definition quite different than the one that we use in the sciences. And of course, it must respect the dignity of human beings and the natural world writ large. There's also a risk here in overvaluing the instrument and of praising the functional. In our societies, we already see this with the way we think about who belongs and who does not belong to the protected category of persons. Human beings whose functions, rationality, self-consciousness, etc., are intact, are imbued with a certain dignity. But once those functions begin to fade or decline for whatever reason, that dignity is often thought to go with it. Indeed, in my own country, and certainly in my own province, which is now the jurisdiction leading the world in the number per capita of people choosing medical assistance in dying, the mantra is that it is better to end your life before you lose your functions, because persons who are functionally diminished are bereft of dignity. Of course, this is the exact opposite of Christian teaching on dignity that is considered inherent in all human beings by virtue of our being made in the image and likeness of God. The Church, in her wisdom, remains critical of the hyperfunctional character of the technocratic paradigm for good reason. In parallel here, I think of growing trends in datafication, the reduction of human beings to mere data suppliers, to the process of collecting data and reading data from patient populations, and the implicit profiling that happens when gathering data. the possibility of firms enticing poorer countries with financial compensation in return for their medical data, and the replicating or amplifying of prejudices, assumptions, or biases that have all too easily been programmed, consciously or not, into our algorithms. The impact of this kind of datafication on human dignity requires serious deliberation, to be sure. Let me also underline here the hyper-functional characteristic of some of the promises of AI that are being heralded with much enthusiasm. We are told that artificial intelligence will take over trivial, repetitive work that no one wants to do so that we humans could go on to engage in more important, worthwhile tasks. The church's teaching on the dignity of work begs us to be cautious of this. My father died very suddenly when I was 1, leaving my mother a widow in her early 30s with 2 little ones. The banal, repetitive work that she was able to secure, the work that AI is ready to assume, is what brought sustenance for a struggling family. Let us be attentive to conversation that trivializes certain kinds of work in this way. The impact of technology on embodiment should also be of particular interest to us in our reflection on human relationships that are mediated by AI. To be sure, at the heart of the Christian tradition is the incarnation, God's choosing to assume human flesh and to become a body among bodies. In light of this, let me recall Pope Francis's attention to the problem of non-embodied interactivity. He says, digital relationships, which do not demand the slow and gradual cultivation of friendship, stable interaction, or the building of a consensus that matures over time, have only the appearance of sociability, yet they do not really build community. Instead, they tend to disguise and expand the very individualism that finds expression in xenophobia and in contempt for the vulnerable. Digital connectivity is not enough to build bridges. It is not capable of uniting humanity. This discussion of non-embodied digital relationships brings to the fore questions around the value or disposability of the human body in a culture of excess like ours. The idea that our bodies or some bodies are ultimately useless or, say, replaceable is symptomatic of a transhumanism that laments the so-called shortcomings of being human, including the inevitability of aging and death, our inadequate and fluctuating intellectual capacity, the unreliability of the body, and our emotional fragility. Some transhumanists look to AI to help free us from said shortcomings. This brings to light something that can easily get lost in the oft prophetic, if not salvific rendering of the scope and potential of AI, the value of limitation. Let's keep this hovering in our minds at our gathering in these days. What shall we as church say about the value of limitation or of our human limitedness? Much of the discourse on technological innovation is more often than not about the surpassing or obliteration of limitation in a transhumanist way that might bring us to new heights of performance and well-being. But let's not forget that the Gospel of John makes plain that Jesus is risen with his wounds, not erased or removed or even healed. Thomas is invited to put his hands in them, but remain completely intact. To be sure, the risen Jesus, the wounded Christ, is recognized by the marks of the limited, wounded body. The implications of injecting AI and other technologies into human-human relationships are vast. Take the creation of robot companions to counter the isolation of older persons as a case in point. Theological bioethicists are asking and mulling over the deeper questions that are at work here. Like, is this the right way to go? Is this not a simple shirking of human responsibility toward other humans? Can robots be companions? Can they be caregivers? Here, theological reflections on what we ought to look for in the accompanying of others, in the ministry of presence to others, widens discussions on the benefits and drawbacks of using these kinds of AI-powered machines, it also begs us to revisit what we mean by care and caregiving. So which AI-powered technologies are truly at the service of the human community? Which do not humanize? Which do not toss aside human responsibility for the other? Which do not impede the covenantal character of the ministry of caregiving and of presence? We might want to ask ourselves how we have come to a point where we are employing care robots for older persons who are isolated and yet who are yearning for human-human interaction, which is a pressing call to our faith communities, I think. Or whether we should be comforted or horrified by the use of AI to develop chatbot avatars of deceased relatives, which are infused with recorded memory and are programmed to imitate the loved one's speech and thought patterns to help the bereaved in their grieving. Here we might reflect on the role of technology not only in assisting bodies, but also in replacing bodies when society writ large has chosen to ignore them. I conclude with this. If indeed we are coming into an aggiornamento of the church's social teaching, let us not shy away from being explicit with that which should be at its very foundation: love, perhaps the mother of peace. I know that this is cliche, and I know that most of us dare not speak of love in our own academic disciplines, bioethics, law, medicine, engineering, even theology, for fear of being dismissed. But in the digital age, when we are raising serious questions about datafication or the possibility of reducing humans to mere data in need of collection, or to the potential threats that AI-powered systems might bring to relationships between humans and the natural world, humans and God, all the more do we need to be reminded that our vision of what is to come must first be rooted in a clear and genuine commitment to love of God, neighbor, community, and the created order of which we are part. If we are simply pursuing developments in AI, technology for technology's sake, guided only by measures of cost and benefit, and what might fill our pocket, with no sense of what we are doing for humankind or the world, then St. Paul's admonition rings true evermore. If I speak in the tongues of humans and of angels, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. I leave my comments there. Thank you.